when you're watching Ant-Man, this movie has got to be like, this is just such a down to earth personal story. It's so different compared to all of the other superhero like kind of starter movies, like beginning movies, like their first movie to come out. This one is just so unique and fun and different, and I watched it and I was like, oh my goodness, like this is so not textbook comic book superhero kind of a vibe. It's just like it feels like if the movie just came out, if you told me like it wasn't a part of like the Marvel universe at all, like there's a way you can make this movie without it being attached to like, I don't know, maybe like the MCU. Like it kind of gives me like a, what's it, Hancock, Hancock with Will Smith, like that's a superhero movie, or like he's like a superhero-esque figure, but he's not like a part of the Marvel franchise, you know what I mean? Essentially it kind of feels like it's just it doesn't feel like a superhero movie rather than just like a human story with like superhero elements attached to it. Like he's able to shrink, he's able to talk to ants, he's able to do all of this other stuff, but it's not like, it doesn't feel like Marvel. It just feels like a good like action comedy movie more than anything else. And I feel like there were so many great bits in the movie that I was genuinely laughing at. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot they did that," or "That was a funny moment," or "This here or that there." Now, the movie is not by any means perfect. You know what I mean? It had a couple of things here and there that were amiss for me. Some of the comedic moments weren't really hitting as hard. Just because I feel like they threw in like some random jokes in there just to like throw them in there, or like, oh, we need like a little bit of a there's a beautiful moment between Hope and her father, in which like, okay, well, I mean, it's a given that I give spoilers, but anyways, it's like they're sharing a very beautiful moment, a tender moment, and then Paul Rudd or Scott Lang will go in there with like a quick joke, and he'll like ruin the moment for comedic effect or whatever, and it's just like, now why did you do that? Like that didn't need to be there. It just ruined the moment, and they did it for like comedic effect. It just doesn't land for me. It just didn't work, and I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. I mean, I get it was trying to be funny. I know that's what they were doing, but it just kind of was like, I kind of wanted to sit in that moment a little longer, or like just cut to the next scene. It doesn't have to be like you have to add something comedic to it to make it not that, but hey, it is what it is. Anyways, so essentially Scott Lang is an ex-convict, or he got out of prison, right, for stealing money, or kept being like a kind of like a thief. He did some, he's not like a bad guy. He was just being like defiant of like big corporations or like people in powerful positions of money. And he wasn't exactly like, he stole money from them, and then he got caught, and then he went to prison, and it is what it is. So he gets out of prison, and then Hank Pym finds him, and he wants him to steal stuff for him, and it becomes this whole like, it becomes a heist movie, which I think is really, really fun. I think it's really, really cool. And it really does fit like the hero or like the superhero like genre. It fits into like the basic story or the basic premise of like becoming a superhero or becoming a hero of any kind. It's just that it's so not, how can I put it? Like Iron Man, like Tony Stark becomes Iron Man in that cave. Like when he creates that suit and he gets out of the cave and he's like defiant and has changed his life or has a new perspective on his life, or he decides like, I'm no longer going to do weapons manufacturing. And that's when he like kind of officially becomes Iron Man, when he becomes like the person that's like fighting against the people that he gave his weapons to, or he saw his weapons being used for the wrong thing, right? Like that's when he kind of becomes Iron Man, when he wears that suit. And in this movie, there's no like tragic backstory, or there's no like, I mean, it's disappointing that he went to prison, you know what I mean? But he did do like a crime, you know what I'm saying? But once you see him with his daughter and you understand like the position he's in as an ex-convict, it's like, well, I can't get a job. Baskin Robbins fired me, you know what I mean? Baskin Robbins always finds out. I thought that was just little bits like that. I think it's hilarious when they're able to like tie it into the script. So Scott goes in for like, he works at Baskin Robbins, and then they're like, Baskin Robbins always finds out. They fire him, and then he goes home, and then his roommate is like, oh, Baskin Robbins, they found out about you? Baskin Robbins always finds out. Like, I thought that's just a hilarious bit to me. I feel like that was one of those little pieces that they sprinkled in there for comedic effect and fun. They were looking through the script and they were like, yeah, that's such a funny moment. You know, and all of the moments in that. They got T.I. in this movie. Like, can you believe that? I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I forgot T.I. was in this movie. That's funny, dude. And then everybody else in the cast is fantastic. I mean, it's such a stacked cast, if I'm being honest. Like, they got some great talent in this. It's so great to have like, I don't know, to sort of have that kind of like team, or have like a great cast of comedic actors. Like, obviously Paul Rudd's fantastic. Michael Douglas, like that's a huge win. They also had Peggy Carter, Haley Atwell in the beginning of the movie. They had the guy who played Howard Stark in there. Evangeline Lilly is like, she's pretty serious in this movie, but she has like really nice tender moments. Bobby Cannavale, that he was great in this one too. A bit of an asshat, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, he was part of the movie. I thought he was great. Michael Pena, obviously, David Dastmalchian. I hope I said that. Dastmalchian. T.I., obviously. Wood Harris being in the movie was like, oh my gosh, like, I thought that was such a cool little cameo that he was in the movie, or he was a part of the movie. But I definitely feel like, it's disappointing because I was like, oh, he was in this movie as like a police officer, as like a cop or whatever. He didn't really get his full like, I just feel like they didn't use enough of his acting talents in the movie. You know what I'm saying? So it was just kind of like, ah, man, he was in the movie. Like, that's cool, but he didn't really get to flex his like acting ability or his chops or whatever, you know what I mean? What I'm saying, like, it feels like, oh, they kind of wasted him a bit. But anyways, yeah, the whole cast was fantastic. Even the daughter, Cassie, she was so adorable, so sweet. Like, I liked that little moment when she's like, she's talking to Bobby or whoever, what's his name? Paxton. She's talking to Paxton, and she's kind of like, are you trying to catch my dad? And he's like, no, I just want to make sure your dad's safe. And she's like, I hope you don't catch him. Like, I was like, that's a ride or die homie right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, loves her dad, wants him to be like the best him possible. And it's just like, it's always nice to have that support. You know what I mean? Especially from his own daughter, you know? So I really like that. In terms of the story, I mean, I definitely like the Avengers tie-in to it. Like, when I say that this movie doesn't feel like a Marvel movie, it just feels like a good kind of hero movie or action comedy movie. Like, this fits an action comedy movie down to the letter, and then add in the Marvel elements to it, right? Like the last Avengers movie and like the other characters. Like, they got Anthony Mackie in this one, which was funny. That's hilarious. I thought that was a great little piece of. I thought it was awesome that they included him in the movie or had Ant-Man fight him. I also like the relationship that Hank Pym, Michael Douglas, has with all of the other, with the Starks. You know what I mean? With Tony Stark, Howard Stark, he kind of is like. This is why he chooses Scott Lang, or this is why he like. Find somebody outside of like the original kind of like Avengers, like rather than choose to go to the superheroes to do the job, he goes to Scott Lang, somebody who's like a master thief, a cat burglar, to do the job because he's succeeded before and he's really interested in him. It's like, I'm going to go to him for the job and not Tony Stark because I don't want to give him access to my technology. I don't want to give him access to my life's work. And I like that tie-in, how he is distrustful of the Starks and how he's also distrustful of the Avengers. And I like that little piece of dialogue that they add in there where he's like, they're too busy dropping cities out of the sky. And that's literally Sokovia he's talking about. And like a month or two before Avengers Age of Ultron came out. So these two movies came out in that 2015 period where it was like bang, bang. Like they were one after the other. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, it's like later on in like, I think it's 2018. Yeah, 2018 when they released Black Panther and then Avengers Infinity War. Like they released Black Panther in February and then in April, May, they released like the next Avengers movie. It was like they were back to back is all I'm trying to say. But yeah, this one, it was like the Avengers came out in May or April. And then by July, in July, they released Ant-Man. So if you watched Avengers Age of Ultron earlier that year, and then you go to see Ant-Man, you're going to get the context of like this storytelling, this long-term storytelling that's so fun and so cool. And I don't know, that was such a great tie-in, you know what I mean? Extra context for fans of those movies. And I was a fan. So I was like, oh snap, he's talking about Sokovia. Like this is after that, or after that situation that just went down or whatnot. And I like that tie-in. I also just like the personal angle of it. When I said this was like a personal movie, it's motivated by Hank Pym's personal connection to his own daughter. And then he sees Scott Lang go to prison for doing morally correct thing, but legally wrong. And then he goes to prison and is separated from his daughter. He's like able to connect with him and then keeps an eye on him because he's like, we could definitely use him, or he's somebody that I can have a part of my team, or that I can essentially say that's like disposable or dispensable. But if he wins, if he's able to help me out, I can help him out in a way that nobody ever helped me or could get me back the relationship with my daughter. So it's just kind of like this, it feels like a perfect mix of everything, you know, and it feels like you see like a great relationship between Paul Rudd and Michael Douglas, or Hank Pym and Scott Lang. There's a personal connection there where it's like Hank Pym sees a part of himself in Scott, and he's just like, I wanted to give to him something that I couldn't give myself, or I can't give myself. And then vice versa, Hank Pym sees a version of himself in Darren Cross that he's not, you know, a version of himself that he sees too much of. He sees too much of himself in, what's his name? In Darren Cross, you know? So because of that, it's like, because of all of that, it plays well, you know what I mean? And it kind of shows how, like, when we attach ourselves to people, or like we get like too close, or we see a little bit too much of ourselves in other people, it becomes less and less like, I don't know, what's the right word? It shows he's capable of like alternate versions of himself, or like younger pieces of him. He sees Darren Cross as like the worst parts of who he is, of like this power hungry, super smart, super intelligent version of who he is. And like, if he had just dived deeper into his technology, he would progress so much further with like the Ant-Man formula. He could do so much, you know what I mean? But he sees that as like a dark road. And what does any of that mean if he doesn't have his family? You know? And then Paul Rudd and Scott Lang is somebody who's so about his family. He just wants to spend time with his daughter. He just wants to be a part of her life and be a part of their life in general, you know? And that's another version of Hank Pym that he sees in Scott Lang is that like, man, he just wants to be with his daughter. Like I want to be with my daughter, like how we used to be, you know? And so it just feels like there's a lot of him trying to help people that are in his position. And then the people that are too far gone, like Darren Cross, who is just, all he has is his business. There's nothing else to do. There's no moving forward for him. There's no next step or progress afterwards. There's just the business. And once he succeeds in that business, it's like the whole world will change. So what happens after that? You know, where does life go? So that's why it's so important to him that he destroy the company. He steals his technology or the suit or any version that he could create where he can kind of mimic his formula, mimic the shrinking tech that he has. And because of that, it's all about how do we take it all down, you know, and keep it out of the hands of the bad or the misguided and into the hands of the right. Keep it protected, keep it safe, you know, from the world. And that's the cool part about it that I really, really like. I do want to say that, I don't know, maybe, I guess where the weaker parts of this movie come from are, I don't want to say the comedy. The comedy is really, really good. Sometimes it's a little bit like too much or like they put it in the wrong moments for comedic effect. Like I said earlier, like Hank Pym just described how Hope's mother died and he's having this beautiful connection with his daughter. He's finally revealing the truth to her and Scott Lang is in the room and he gets to see it. He gets to experience it. And he's kind of like, it's this beautiful moment. And then Scott Lang comes in with like a little joke, and then that's how the scene ends. That's how it transitions out of it, and it just kind of like, you know, I just didn't like that part of it. But I guess the story itself isn't all that complex or complicated, and it shouldn't be. It's kind of like straightforward. It's they want him to steal the suit or to hack in and steal whatever Darren Cross is creating, and then that's it. Blow up the building and whatnot, and that's it. And then outside of that, hilarity ensues. You know what I'm saying? But I'm trying to think of like, no, I think that the story is pretty solid. You can call it basic, or you can call it pretty like what's it called? You can call it simple or whatnot, but it's not bad by any means. Like they play it pretty safe, I think. Let me see what else is there. I want to say the action in this movie is so fun. Like the shrinking fights, those are hilarious. Like when Paul Rudd and Darren Cross are fighting in the suitcase and he's like, I'm going to disintegrate you. And then the iPhone or whatever starts playing Disintegrate by whatever. Like that's hilarious. And it's fun to see him shrink and hang out and learn about the ants. And it's cool to see him like manipulate the ants. And it's cool to see him fly on top of an ant. Like all of that shrinking stuff. Everything becomes so huge and everything becomes dangerous, right? And that's the cool part about it. About that shrinking, you know? I think that's so cool. All of those little pieces, all of those little moments are so... They're so beautifully sprinkled that it's just kind of like, oh man, like every time he shrinks, it is kind of like a superpower. And every time he gets big again or gets back to normal size, it's like, oh snap, he's regular, but then he can shrink again and it changes everything. It makes the dynamic so much more fun and hilarious and cool to see it all happen, you know, seamlessly. I also think Luis's storytelling or like his kind of monologuing is so funny. Like I like how it goes from him talking and then it shows everybody else talking, but they use his voice. I thought that was a great bit. Like there's so many great moments in this movie that just feel like they were used properly and they were used like effectively. And it's kind of hard for me to be like, oh, this movie wasn't any good, but it is good. It's just different from what we're so used to. Like compared to the Avengers, Ant-Man isn't as good as the Avengers, right? But when you look at it from like just outside of it and just the movie by itself, if you didn't know anything about Spider-Man or Batman or Captain America or Iron Man, or like basically if you watched none of the Marvel movies before and you just watched Ant-Man, it would be a hilarious action comedy, kind of like a hero story, right? Like, but because of the added context of like this superhero world or like what they've created thus far, it seems so small in comparison. You know what I mean? Literally and, narratively, storytelling wise, it doesn't feel like a large scale. Well, it can be if they fail, but it's not. You know what I mean? It feels really cool to see it more of like a small scale story like that. But anyways, there were some production issues. I did try to like, I do remember seeing like, I don't know if it was at the time or if it was like later on, they were talking about this writer that they had for I think he was like the original, like he was the one who created the original script for the character and for the story, but they ended up like kicking him out, or they were just kind of like, yeah, we had to part ways because it didn't fit the story. And then in the end, they ended up using like a lot of his material, but they didn't, and they gave him like a writing credit. His name's Edgar Wright. And I could definitely see how some of his elements maybe fit into it, but maybe they had to change a couple of things because of like the Marvel franchise as a whole. I don't know how to explain it. I also don't know all of what he like put into the movie, but I've kind of like seen some things or like heard some things that it's like all of the funny bits and moments that are like in the movie are probably directly related to like his version of the script, or like things that he was doing that like he put into the script or like made it into the movie, into the final cut. And then maybe some of the like outside stuff, or like maybe more of like the Avengers line, like dropping a building on them, or like the Avengers facility fight scene that Paul Rudd has with the Falcon with Sam Wilson. Like that was added after like he got removed. And then they added that part in. And they added like all of the like those little funny sequences and moments, you know what I mean? So that fight between Ant-Man and the Falcon, that was added after, after he was taken out. But then like the disco where he shrinks for the first time, or like when Luis is breaking down how he knows about the safe, Hank Pym's safe, and then like maybe some of the action sequences and whatnot, those were maybe added later on. You know what I mean? I don't know how to describe it, but those were his. How do I phrase it? Is that like Edgar Wright probably put in a lot of the comedic effort, like Luis's dialogue or monologues and stuff, and like I don't know, some of the hilarious details were maybe largely in part because of him, but then maybe some of the action sequences, some of the character references, or like breaking into the Avengers facility, that was probably added afterwards, and then they had to figure it out from there. But anyways, he did great. You know what I mean? It's disappointing that his vision, or like it always sucks when you see like a writer or like somebody who's like really creative get like booted out because, or like get pushed over to the side because their views are like, when differences of a version of a movie happen, it's always disappointing because it's just like, darn it, like this was your idea of a movie and it could have been that version of the movie, but then they wanted to go another direction, and in the end it's like you versus this whole franchise. It's like there's nothing you can really do. It's like, all right, let me stand back and let them do what they want, and now my idea doesn't really get to be like the full version of what my idea could be or should be, and now I have to live with like this lesser version or this other idea kind of like being out there. But overall, because I don't know that, you know what I mean? I don't know what his like full vision or like what the full movie would have been or could have been. I don't feel as like I don't feel as though I was like robbed of anything, but at the same time, it's like, oh, that sucks that he was working on it for so long, and then just at the last second to kind of like get kicked out of it or to not be a part of it anymore. You know, it sucks. It sucks. That sucks. But overall, I think Ant-Man is one of those like, I think it's one of those experimental and fun Marvel movies where it doesn't really feel like a Marvel movie until they add like Marvel elements to it. So I feel like in a lot of ways, it's just a clear example of like what Marvel is doing with their like superhero characters or like their the characters that they have in their arsenal is that they're making them personal stories, like human stories with superhero elements attached to them. Whereas like what DC was doing at the time, or what they were trying to do, was make, I don't know, they were trying to make like superhero stories with like human beings inside of them. You know what I mean? I don't know how to describe it. It's like DC was just trying to make superhero movies, and Marvel was trying to make human stories that had like superhero elements added to them, you know? So what's a good example of that? It's like, okay, oh, well, Captain America, right? It's like he wants to be a soldier. Like a lot of people wanted to be soldiers back in the day. He wanted to fight in the war, and he wanted to like fight the Nazis, and he wanted to be of service to his country. That's not something that's like only him alone shares. That's a very human experience. That's a human reality. Like people are like, I want to serve my country. I want to be a soldier. I want to fight in the war. I want to fight the bad guys. I want to do that stuff and all of it. You know what I mean? But then they add in the element of, well, what if he was the strongest soldier? What if he was the strongest human being that we could possibly get, you know? And then that added with it creates like the superhero that we know as Captain America, you know? And then Iron Man, it's like, what if a billionaire scientist, what if like the smartest billionaire in the world was able to make like this suit of like armor, and he was able to like fight and fly in the sky? It just feels like a human story, a very, it has like human story in it. And then they go, let's throw this in there. You know, let's see if we can attach it to this person, this character, you know? So, and the same with like Spider-Man. It's like, he's just a regular kid, teenager in high school. What if he gets bitten by a radioactive spider? Now, how does he move throughout the world? You know, that's what makes them so relatable, is that they're flawed and that they're human people. You know, you can't relate to Superman because he's Superman. You can't, I was going to say you can't relate to Batman, but he's kind of in the same spot as as Tony Stark, except, no, Batman, that's why Batman's so relatable. You know, Batman is relatable in that sense, or I guess maybe Green Lantern or whatever. But anyways, my point being, Ant-Man just feels like a very human story, very personal story, one about family and connecting with your family, one to be with your family. And Scott is given an amazing opportunity to help Hank Pym and to save the world, you know what I mean? In a small way, you know? And that's funny. That's cool about it, you know? And when I think back to when I first watched this movie, I definitely was like, I liked it, but compared to the Avengers movie I saw earlier, it didn't really feel like it progressed, what's it called? The story forward. Does that make sense? Like, the events of Avengers Age of Ultron are going to progress the story to the next movie, the movie that comes after Ant-Man. You know what I'm saying? But then Ant-Man's going to be a part of that next movie too. So it all kind of like, it comes together, it folds together, you know what I mean? There's layers and layers and layers of it. It's like you're making croissants, you know what I'm saying? Or you're making like a biscuit or whatnot, you know what I mean? Like, you have to fold and fold and fold layer after layer after layer. And that way it all kind of like mixes together, and then you get like these layers of flakes and crust, and it's so beautiful, you know, beautiful to see the bread being made, you know what I'm saying? But Long story short, Ant-Man, it was a really good movie. It's like one of those movies that knows what it is and does it well. You know what I mean? I haven't heard anybody say like Ant-Man is terrible, but I haven't heard anybody say like it's the best superhero movie. It's just good at what it is. You know what I mean? It's a great action comedy movie. It has the MCU kind of as like the background or kind of like a part of that world, and so they get to kind of like mix it all together and have fun with it. I think that's really cool. That's cool to me to see at least. Paul Rudd steals the show. Like Paul Rudd every single time. I feel like the whole cast is pretty well balanced. Everybody has great moments and great comedic timing and funny back and forth. You know, even the villain played by Corey Stoll, like he does a great job with this character and he gets good moments. Evangeline Lilly has great moments. Michael Douglas, great moments. Michael Pena, great moments. T.I., David, the daughter, Bobby, like everybody, Paxton, Kurt, Dave, like everybody works well together. And it feels like everybody has like a good relationship and a good like synergy between them. Everybody's like working and has a good mix. And I feel like that's what's really special about this cast is everybody played their roles very beautifully and it made the movie just great. It didn't feel like anybody was like doing anything outside of what their character would do or anything that was like weird. It just fit the thing of it. So overall, the movie is very solid. It's very good at what it does. And I really like it a lot. So go watch Ant-Man. It's just like, it's a perfect all around movie. Like, oh, well, not perfect. Perfect's the wrong word. It's like a really good family movie to watch anytime, anywhere with, I guess, anyone, you know? So I'm not mad at it. Like, I would rewatch this movie, you know? It's that good. But anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you. Wait. Oh man, I almost ended it. Stan Lee cameo. Stan Lee cameo was at the end when Luis is talking to Paul Rudd again and he's doing his monologue. Crazy stupid fine. Yo, shout out Stan Lee for that line. Stan Lee was great. I think that was another hilarious bit that they did. I thought that was really, really cool. A nice little like cameo moment. I think that's like one of his funniest like lines of dialogue. But yeah, it's really good. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.